Well, there's a couple of points here. In the first place, just to correct a misapprehension that you may have, there's already a national firearms register called the Central Firearms Register, maintained by the SAPS, maintained very poorly by the SAPS, I might say. So there is already, that already exists. I mean, I don't know why they've chucked it into this bill as if it's something new, because it's nothing new at all. We've had that. We've always had that. Yeah, as to the rest of the bill, limiting or removing the motivation of self-defense as a reason to own a firearm is just one of the iniquities that this bill tries to push through on the South African public. You must remember that this is the same South African Police Service. The South African Police Service has proposed this bill via the one half of the police ministry is the police. The other half of the police ministry is the Civil Secretariat. The Civil Secretariat has proposed this bill, and this is the same police service that has just cut the visible policing budget. That's the budget that looks after you and I, by 3.8 or 3.9 billion. We're not sure exactly what the figures are. And at the same time has increased the VIP protection budget. That's the part of the police that looks after the minister and his pals, to 1.7 billion. And in general, the policing budget has decreased. So this is the same police service that in 2018 the National Commissioner leant across the table in Parliament and said, let me be very clear on this. The South African Police Service has a mandate which is impossible to fulfill. Their mandate is to protect the South African citizenry. They cannot do that by their own admission. And yet they want to take away from you and I our most viable means of self-protection. We are guaranteed the right to life and the right to defend that life in terms of our Constitution. Without the means to do that, we're absolutely helpless, and the right to life is pointless.
I want us to start breaking down these proposals. Among the number of controversial proposals are the plans to ban South Africans from getting gun licenses for the purpose of self-defense, which you have already alluded to. Is that wise in a country as crime-ridden as South Africa?
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing, but yeah, absolutely. The South African citizenry is left with no other option than to look to themselves to protect themselves, being that the South African Police Service has admitted that they can't. The South African Police Service has said, look, we can't look after you, but you're not allowed to look after yourselves either. So that's kind of weird. To me, it says there's another game at play here. I'm not sure what that is. I'm not sure whether the police service is just not trying to throw dust in our eyes to prevent us from seeing the immense incompetence and corruption of the police service itself. I'm not sure whether we're not being eye-blinded to try so that somebody can try and sneak something else through. I don't know what the motivation is behind this, but the one thing is very clear is that the South African citizenry is massively against this, and I'm not talking about gun owners only. I've taken part in the last 3 weeks in maybe 100 interviews, and a lot of them have been live interviews with viewers and listeners calling in, and almost to a man or woman, every single one of those callers is saying, these guys are mad. How are we supposed to look after ourselves? How are we supposed to protect our families? And as you say, that's only one of the aspects. The other aspects, which are just as preposterous, are limiting firearms for sporting purposes and for hunting, and eliminating the category of collectors entirely, private collectors. So all those heritage firearms that are valued by whoever holds them for whatever cultural or historical heritage purposes. Remember that our heritage with firearms goes way back in time, goes back hundreds of years. One of the first gun laws in South Africa were actually created by the Cape provincial government to limit the Basotho access to firearms. There was something called the War of the Gun in the Eastern Cape in the 1880s. And interestingly, the War of the Gun and the resistance of the Basotho using firearms to the approaching Cape settlers who were encroaching on their lands led to the formation of a little organization called the ANC. And now that same ANC, 100 years later, is coming after the guns. It's just preposterous.
Without sounding a bit insensitive to what you are saying here, there's also the view that the changes are aimed at assisting in reducing the number of firearms in private hands and consequently reducing the incidence of violent crimes in the country. Don't you think this will assist?
Not at all. It will actually work exactly opposite. In fact, the Institute of Race Relations has just come out with a survey. Let me first say, South Africa is a research poor country. We have no research in this country that deals directly with these matters. So anybody that tells you that the science has led us or research shows is talking absolute rubbish. So what's happened is a couple of organizations have started to put those research resources together. One of them is the Institute of Race Relations, and they're coming out right now with a study that shows that the less firearms there are in private hands, the more criminal violence occurs. So the less guns, the more violence. At the same time that the president speaks about the second wave of gender-based violence, we are saying, Mr. President, you're the one that's driving the second wave of gender-based violence. The only thing that ladies that a 50-kilogram or 60-kilogram lady has, the only chance she has of defending herself against an attacker who's larger than her or several attackers is by the use of a private firearm. And many of them are. And many of them do defend themselves. So, yeah. Mr. President, Mr. Police Minister, what the hell are you up to?
But, Paul, with all respect, let's also consider the fact that many a times guns do end up in the wrong hands. I mean, one considers incidents where maybe a child might find themselves handling a firearm that may be placed negligently. Let's consider this as well. What's your response to this?
Of course. Absolutely. In cases where that does happen, and they happen very rarely, by the way, but they are noteworthy perhaps because they happen so rarely. That's absolutely tragic, and it's horrible, and it's a crime. The firearm owner in that case has committed a crime. He has negligently let his firearm fall into the hands of someone who's not allowed to have that firearm. That is his crime. He's a criminal. We can't, we have laws against criminals in this country. Unfortunately, more of them are honored in the breach than in the execution. We very rarely find people being charged and prosecuted for the crimes that they commit, let alone the crimes of negligently handling firearms. But we do have those statutes on the book, and those people are dealt with harshly, and we encourage that.
Let's move on now before I let you go. The bill also further regulates the issuing of licenses for hunters, with applicants having to prove that they are engaged in this hobby. Speak to us about your analysis on this aspect of this proposed legislation.
Well, you see, and Slansla, that's actually a very important point, and that's probably the point that has the furthest reach economically in South Africa. Hunting is not a hobby. It's a hobby to many individuals, but it's an industry in this country, and it's an industry that particularly serves the rural areas where there is very little other economy, where there is no other agriculture. Hunting lands are typically lands which aren't suitable for planting crops or for raising domesticated livestock. So those areas, the areas in the northern province, areas such as, for example, Aldays, that's almost an entirely hunting-driven economy. Everybody that works in Aldays has some or other tie to the hunting fraternity. The guys that work behind the counter in the shops in Aldays, they earn their living because there's hunters coming through there to hunt on the hunting properties in the area. If the hunting is curtailed, as it surely will be by this, those guys are going to lose their jobs. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people in the economically depressed rural areas that are going to be looking for work. In South Africa today, really?
Let me give you the parting shot here to speak about what your response is going to be. Are you in any way going to be challenging these proposals? If so, what inputs will you be making?
Absolutely. In fact, we started challenging these. In fact, the week before they came out, we had wind that they were coming out. They hadn't appeared yet, but we started to rev up our motors already at that stage. We've been waiting for something like this to come up into the news for years. In 2018, we shot the draft bill down. Pardon the pun. This year, we presented with something which is far, far worse. We started already 4 weeks ago by contacting the members of parliament and suggesting that there was something coming which we didn't think would be beneficial, and we had better ways of solving the problem, and here's how you solve the problem. The moment the bill appeared, we started putting out invitations for people to comment, both via the participation platforms, Dear South Africa, also through the IRR, for campaigns directly to Parliament. There are a bunch of petitions around that people are signing. I think just about every political party except for two has come out with a petition against this, which their members are signing up to. The African Christian Democratic Party. It's widespread. The reaction to this has been visceral, and you can tell that it's a groundswell. We have our own campaigns, letter writing campaigns to the Civilian Secretary of Police, to Parliament. We'll be holding mass demonstrations. We already have one planned and approved for Cape Town in the beginning of July, just before the date when the public comments will be stopped. We have a big demonstration happening in Gauteng in a couple of weeks' time. We've been contacted by the widest range of people. It's quite bizarre. Taxi associations, self-defense units. This is South Africa. This is South Africa, or the government against South Africa. The police ministry against South Africa. It's not any one group in South Africa. South Africans are diverse. The gun ownership is diverse in South Africa. We estimate at this stage 60% of existing firearm owners in this country today are black African. This is something which is going to touch everybody.
Right, Paul, thank you very much for your time. Paul Oxley there, not mincing his words. He's the chairperson of the Gun Owners of South Africa.